products of our own experiences. One thing that always strikes me is that when we include students in the jury, I'm always struck by the thoughtfulness. And because they are themselves in the trenches, and there are certain things that the students themselves are really seeking. And so it's also a evidence of what the students themselves are interested in.
You know, I feel like there's a sense of sort of longevity here, though. And I think that the identity of Woodbury is actually something that's it's changing, but there's something that kind of remains over time. Whereas I think that we have a demographic of students and we have faculty where we're actually interested in the craft of making buildings at some level. We're also interested in representation, of course. We're incredible, we have faculty who are very, very invested in the representation of architecture. But I think we actually have students who can graduate and do good architecture. You know, I think that's a good thing, right? I haven't given up on that project yet.
I'm usually trying to figure out what questions students are asking. And sometimes it's the way that they begin to frame a question through the work, right? So evidence of a search for something, even if they don't quite know that that's what they're doing yet. And something that begins to point toward a way in which they begin to find their own voice in the work. So what's at stake for them sort of personally in the way that they begin to read, say, a studio brief. And so a lot of times this happens in certain kinds of awkwardnesses in the work, right? There's something sort of ungainly or not quite figured out, or something that we might call a kind of mistake, right? A place where one loses control over what one is trying to do. And it's usually when something starts to crack open. And that's usually where I start to get really interested, because it usually means there's a moment of vulnerability in the project where there's actually the potential for real learning to start to happen. So that's often what I'm looking for.
So what's unique about Woodbury? What's unique about Woodbury in relation to other architecture schools?
The energy of the students here is really good.
If it's easy, you're not learning anything. You're doing something well within your comfort zone.
There's a very close-knit relationship between the students and the faculty here, and that is, I think, almost entirely due to a kind of physical smallness, right? So that puts us in juxtaposition with one another. We're constantly walking by each other. We see each other at in the labs, on pinups. So there's a kind of dynamic that happens, and it's very informal. And I think that sets up a really nice dialogue between students and faculty.
You know, we still teach as if there will be a linear progression in a student's career, and I do think that what Woodbury provides is a way to think about multidisciplines and how that sort of multidisciplines begin to sort of interact together to make a greater architecture ultimately.
One of the things I think impresses me about Woodbury is that it's a school that I think owns professional education in LA.
What I love about Woodbury is that it changes you. Conviction in the power of good design to change people's lives. And I think here this commitment to social justice and to bringing beautiful places to people who don't have them or don't have access to them or the resources for them, I think is something that makes Woodbury truly unique. And the students, I think, select Woodbury because they see something in Woodbury that other programs are not talking about, and it has to do with civic engagement and social justice, but it has to do with the power of good design to be able to then accomplish change, civic change, and social, kind of radical social evolution. And so good design is intrinsic to that equation. So I think that we teach really good design, but we teach it for really good ends.
I think I'm always trying to be in a dialogue with students. I actually work really hard to try and not impose my own value system on my students too much, which is of course very difficult to do because it's your frame of reference for the world. But it's really important to me to try and get students to develop their, like I said earlier, their own voice. And so I think that there's a real richness in the program just because of the makeup of our students that really challenges a lot of the institutional conventions of architecture that I find really fascinating and very, very unique to our school.
So I think the thing that I look for in a student's work is effort and craft and detail and a real commitment to the project. It's not the idea, it's the resolution.